The Notcast, life, love and misery and deep shit.
Do you ever wonder, what the fuck am I doing here? Is this it? Maybe you've got the car, career, house, family and friends, everything that should make you happy. But still, there's this tenacious sense of being trapped, stuck, lost, or just a bit bloody empty. Welcome to the Notcast, where two therapist coaches, aka theracoaches, lay bare their psycho-spiritual journey of struggle, strife, and realization in their soul search for the keys to a happier, more fulfilling life.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to episode 27 of the Notcast. How do I get over my childhood? 5 keys to liberate yourself from your past and thrive. Yeah, needed something like that. Thanks.
Thought I'd try a new one this episode.
Love it. Love it. Okay.
So getting over your childhood.
Sorry.
Just that small little ting.
Yeah, just that, you know, a little bit over there somewhere. Yeah. It was really funny because I was like sitting and when I was reflecting on this earlier, I was thinking, how would I have felt listening to an episode of something like this? I don't know, maybe about 15 years ago, 18 years ago, something like that, before I started my process. And honestly, I was thinking I would have sat there being really defensive and really resistant to something like this. So I guess I wanted to start by just sort of saying, approach this with an open heart and mind.
That's better than me. I'd have probably just seen it and been judgmental as fuck just from seeing it advertised. I don't know if I'd even read the blurb. I'd have been like, that's probably shit. Next.
Great. What a great advert for the episode that is.
No, but like to what you were talking about, like that kind of thing would have been my attitude, but it's because of where I was at, you know, a few years ago, because I don't know, like I knew the truth of, well, I guess it goes back to that, you know, I knew there was something wrong with me, and I knew that, I don't know, even though I was looking for answers to change things, I kind of had already decided that it couldn't really be changed, or that whatever was on offer wasn't going to be good enough or wasn't going to work for me or whatever.
Yeah. That's kind of where I was with it too. It was like, well, I'm broken and I'm fucked up and it's all their fault. And, you know, how is that going to change? And I guess a lot of that was around not wanting to take any responsibility in any of it and just finding it a lot easier to go, well, they did that. And that sort of signed off my life as this fucked up adventure that it is. So it felt easier, even though it wasn't, because actually life was really, really shit and very, very difficult and messy all of the time.
It's interesting you say that about responsibility, because I do see it like that now. But like if someone had said to me before, you're not taking responsibility for this, I would have told them to go fuck themselves. Yeah. But I think that's because of how because I didn't see that was a thing. I didn't see that, because I don't know. I'm still not a big fan of the word responsibility because of it depending on the perspective of the way you come to the word. I think for me, it's like it's the difference between being at cause or being at effect.
Yeah,
it's the difference of being at, okay, this stuff has happened to me. This is the way things are, and I'm helpless in this situation. There's nothing I can do, and seeing things in a way that's saying, okay, I can do something. I am an active agent in this. I do have the ability to do something, to make some kind of change, to have some sort of effect. And I think that we can package that up in the word responsibility, but I think heard the wrong way, especially, you know, where I used to hear that kind of thing from, it was like that finger pointy, you're not taking responsibility for this.
Okay. Yeah. No, I hear that. I guess the experience that I'm kind of, for me, that came up for me around that is for me, it was a total letting go. Like the spaces that I was in, I could quite easily sort of go, well, this is like this because of, rather than believing I had any part in it whatsoever. So not what happened to me in the past, but more in the present, trying to, well, move forward, but not moving forward and being remained in my stuckness.
Yeah.
And then going, well, it was all of those things. It was just all of those things. So yeah, I get, yeah, no, absolutely. Because like you, yeah, somebody, and people used to, it's like, oh, you're not taking responsibility for your life. And no, don't go there. Don't do that.
Yeah. And I suppose a lot of what I would do is, like, I had a very good understanding, I would say, of why I was the way that I was.
Mm.
And actually, when I look back on it now, it's like, well, I had a very well-honed description or a very well-honed story about why that was. But in a way, like, I thought that gave me power, and I thought, you know, in some way that was credit to my ability to understand myself and be self-aware.
I love that.
But actually, it wasn't it. It meant I had a good description about why I am like I am. But what was kind of presupposed in that was, so that can't change. Or,
Yeah.
so this is, you know, there's little I can do about it. And I didn't really see that distinction before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because that's, yeah, I felt stuck, or I believed I was stuck with all of the things that had happened to me, and me not having any agency in any of that. Like, it wasn't my choice. Then obviously I landed in a space where it was like, well, it's just like that. And these are all the reasons why my life is going to end up like this. It's just, yeah. And when I look back on it now, with the foresight or the, you know, joining of dots that happens, yeah, I can see how the story served me then and in those spaces. And it made total sense to me when I was there.
Yeah. I do think I mean, for me, when I look back at myself and what I've learned working with clients as well, I really do. I think that there's a positive function for that. It's like when I've got a story for it, it makes me feel like I'm not helpless in a way, or I'm not nuts.
Yeah.
And it's that protective, it's that, I guess, that protective quality. It's like, yeah, there's a good reason for this.
Mm-hmm.
But I also find the other side of that is that it's very trapping, because, well, you can't delete the past.
Yeah.
As such.
Yeah, it is what it is, right?
Well, or is it? But we'll get to that.
I love it. Yeah.
So when I was doing my word research this time, I don't know, I found it an interesting one, because there was nothing particularly that stood out. So then I was looking at a lot. I was trying to look at all of it, and, well, I'll take you down a little bit of a journey about where I got to.
Let's go.
So the first one was childhood. So childhood, the state or period of being a child. Simple enough.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The etymology for that is child and -hood. So child, a young human below the age of puberty or legal age of majority. Fair enough. And -hood is forming nouns denoting a condition, quality, collection, or group, and comes from the Old English hard, which again is person, condition, or quality. But when I think about a hood, as in like a material hood, like it's a covering, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, childhood, that makes sense. The period of life when you're a child. Nothing particularly profound in that, but I was like, okay, well, I learned something. Past was the interesting one for me.
Mm-hmm.
So past, gone by in time or no longer existing, or the time before the moment of speaking or writing. The etymology for past is pass. So I was like, okay, let's look at pass. Pass means to move or cause to move in a specified direction. So it's all about movement.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a couple of others, like it also means of time to elapse to go by, to transfer something to someone. And there are other connotations which are basically to do with approval, or to essentially get through a gate, like if you pass an exam or something like that. But the etymology for pass is pace. So again, it's all about movement. And this, not to skip ahead, but like, I know we've talked about this before, but for me, the past isn't really real.
I didn't think you were just going to land it like that.
Well, what I mean by that is that past is a human construction.
Yeah.
A better way of putting it is time is a human construction. Like, there's movement of objects through space, but the fact that we remember where they came from and can predict where they're going to,
I love it.
That's time, but that's actually movement of objects through space.
We are getting deep, people.
Yeah.
Yes, because for me, the past exists in my head.
Yeah.
Doesn't really exist anywhere other than in my head. And even that changes shape according to where I'm at with the past. So, yeah, it's an interesting one because sometimes it can feel and be made so real in the present. Yeah,
and I don't think, to say like, the past is constructed and time is constructed, I don't mean that to devalue the experience we have, because what you have in your mind, your experiences, they shouldn't be ignored. But I think it definitely helps to have that distinction, to understand that what I remember as being the past is different potentially from reality.
Yeah.
That there is this separation between what my mind is doing and what is actually on the outside, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because for me, I know it's kind of easy to say it in a looking back kind of space, in the space that I am now. And I know that when I was in it, it was completely different. But it's the knowing and having the awareness, because it changes all of the time. Just depends where I'm at and how I feel and what's going on for me in my life. That kind of seems to dictate sometimes how I view my past and the impact that it's had on me and the part it plays in my present.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, I'm going to jump into my first point because I've kind of already started to share it.
Go on then.
That's that. See the past is an illusion. It's only ever right now.
Yeah.
And for me, it's kind of pointing to what you talked about, in that I can be in a different mood or a different headspace, and then I'm recalling different things about the inverted commas past and about what that means about me and who I am. And yet then I can be in a positive headspace, and then I'm thinking about that less, or I'm thinking about it differently, or it doesn't bother me so much.
Yeah.
And for me, if the way I'm looking at that is telling me about the past, that's a lot harder to do something about, or to change or whatever, than it is if I can see that it's my perspective on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely agree with that. It's similar, obviously, to one of the points. But yeah, I think that's really, really important. And, well, I'm just going to do one of mine then, because it makes sense. What meaning have I assigned to this?
What meaning have I assigned to this?
I feel like, we've spoken to it, but I feel like it's really, really important to kind of ask that question. Like, what meaning have I assigned to my past? How much power am I giving my past? Because I know for me, what I realized was I gave my past a lot of power, even though it was gone, right? It was that space of, as you spoke to, the actual things that had happened to me were done. And I kind of realized that I was keeping it alive in the way I needed to assign meaning to my life at that time, in the way that I wanted to. And those were actually the spaces that kept me in very, very damaging and toxic relationships, because that was the meaning I assigned. It was pretty much, well, then this is how it has to go forward, right? Because that's what I witnessed. So that's what I am. So for me, that question was really important. Like, what meaning am I assigning to it? And it changes. I know where I am at now. It's a space where it has informed what I get to do now and who I get to be, because it's informed the work that I've ended up doing and everything. But in other spaces, it's been horrendous because it's kept me so stuck. It's kind of kept me shackled to spaces that have been so damaging. So yeah, I feel those questions, well, lots of questions, but definitely like, what meaning am I giving to my past? Because I knew for me that I was the one that was holding on to it. I was the one that was giving it so much meaning. I was the one that was allowing it to become my present.
Yeah. And that's something I didn't really understand before, was that I actually had a part to play in that I was assigning meaning, that I had a perspective on my past, I guess. I think the way I saw it was that what I remembered was correct, if you like, or was only one way.
Yeah.
And in some ways, this is a difficult thing to kind of, or it can be a difficult thing to talk about, because, like I said, I think if I'd have heard something like this talked about before, I would have easily been angry and written it off.
Yeah.
Because I was so sure. No, I know what happened to me, and I know it meant this, and I know, and I don't see it like that anymore. I do see that, I had a perspective, but then in not seeing that was one perspective, that's what kept the stuckness for me.
Yeah. And I feel it's important to step out of it and look at it as a whole picture. Because like you said, for me as well, I had one facet, one angle that I held onto for dear life without really allowing myself to see the full picture.
Yeah. I remember, I think I was in lower school, and I might have shared this before actually, but I had a teacher who was particularly tyrannical. But I think it was like the last year of lower school or something, so I'd have been like 7 or 8 or something. And she was particularly eggshelly to be around. And I remember I developed a bit of a stutter. And I mean, I don't know why. It could have been because of being around her. It could have been because of what, how things were at home. Who knows? It could have just been my age and because I was worried about shit. In any case, I had this stutter, and I remember being in this like circle, this group. Basically, it was like a reading group, and this teacher was there. And I remember it getting to me, and I still remember the word to this day. I had to read this line, and I got to the word starling, and I couldn't pronounce it, and I started to like st, and she just lost her shit. I was like, David, you know the word, just say the word.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was like, what the fuck? And I remember that really stuck with me, because I felt then quite humiliated because I felt like I couldn't do it, and all that conflict of stuff. And that wasn't a nice experience at all. What that then became was I became terrified of speaking out loud. So I wouldn't even try. And I even got my mum, like when I moved up to schools, to go around and tell all the teachers like not to allow me to read out loud. Like they weren't to, which felt good for me. It was like, oh, I'm away from the problem. But then I never got to practice doing that again. Yeah. I mean, naturally it went away when I went into sixth form. I think I suddenly noticed I felt a lot more confident, because I'd got a bit older, and because the classes were smaller by then. But I'd never had because I had this story that I can't do that, and because of that teacher, and I carried that even further. We're only talking a few years ago now. I remember being sat, because I would always struggle to read books. I'd start reading a book and I'd find myself distracted and get annoyed with it. And I would be like, oh, it's because I never read when I was younger because of that teacher.
I love that. I love
Seriously, that was my story. Even though I used to read a load on the internet, my brain had somehow managed to decide that, you know, reading internet articles wasn't the same. It was different for books. But I remember there was a particular point where I was like, oh, hang on a minute. No, this is happening in the now. This isn't like, what if I can do something about this? And I started to put my attention on it rather than just, like I said, believe the story and put the book down and get stuck in that old pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The can'ts. I just can't. I can't do it. I can't do it. Yeah.
Well, and that leads me on to my second point, really. And that is kind of my second point, I guess, which is, you know, stop playing the blame game.
Man, you stole my point.
Always. But when you sit there and brainstorm like 412 points every episode, they're bound to come up.
Just fuck off. I can't help it. It's from my childhood. I need to overcompensate.
But this talks to all the stuff that I was talking about, right? Like that, when I was blaming something else, somebody else for it, it took that possibility away from me that I could do something. I was automatically at effect. I was automatically in the kind of inverted commas victim space with that. And it wasn't until I saw, hang on a minute, maybe I can do something about this. Maybe it's not just to do with that. I could do something different.
Love it. Which angle did I come at that from? The blame game. Yeah. I know for me it was just easier to go, oh, it's just not me. It's not me. I can't help how I am. And then I didn't have to look at it either. Right? It was just easier to go, it's your fault. And it's your fault. And if all of those things weren't like that, I wouldn't be like this. So yeah, that's the angle that it really sat with me the most. And I see it a lot in clients as well. Just that whole blame. It has to be somebody's fault. It has to be somebody's fault. And I think we're so used to assigning fault and blame. Who's in the wrong? Who's in the right? I think I wasted so much time in that cycle. Honestly, I can't get that time back. So, yeah. And I think that kind of fits in with where I wanted to go next, which is what do you really want? Because I know when I started that pathway of exploring my past and my childhood, I went into it quite angry at first. I went into it with the blame and the hate and I need justice and why did they do that? So I think a large part of it for me was my parents and the domestic abuse situation when I was younger. And I was just very, very angry. And it was a really fruitless activity because it just kind of seemed to go around in circles. I was never satisfied. I never got to that point of, oh, okay, you know? So ask yourself the question, what do you really want? Is it an apology? Is it an acknowledgement? Is it validation? Is it for you to heal? Is it for you not to feel any of it? Why? What do you want from that process? Understand that, because then you can work towards that. And if it is things like, you know, blame, validation, an apology, then ask yourself, what will change if I get that?
Yeah.
What's going to be different? What is that going to take away? Because I know for me, it didn't change anything. I had a couple of conversations with my parents around it. And I really thought it would be that moment of, liberation. You know, like everything would suddenly fall into place and my life would be better. And actually it meant nothing. It didn't change what had already happened because that can't change. So I feel like it's really, really important for people to really understand at that point, like, what are they searching for in that process? What do they really want from that process? And how would that change anything? Yeah.
No, that makes sense to me. Because with the whole why stuff, for example, I'm in kind of two minds about it. Like on one level, for me, if we look at why is it like that, or, you know, what's the connection between my childhood and how I am now, for example, in some ways it can be helpful because if I know why, then maybe for example, I know that then, like, if I know that didn't work well for me, maybe then I know not to do that. If I'm in a similar position, for example, if it was like in what you're talking about in terms of parenting.
Yeah.
But more often than not, I find that, like, especially going digging for stuff, like, you might find out why, but that doesn't necessarily resolve the problem, kind of like you talked about.
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of regression work with people and kind of linking, past memories with what was showing up for now in the now. And sometimes people would have real insights into why they would do what they do and stuff like that. And sometimes you get that insight that was like, oh, so that's about my mum. It's not about my boss. So I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But sometimes also they wouldn't have that insight. It would just reinforce the story possibly, which is what would happen to me. It'd be like, well, yeah, because my dad did that. Then this is why I'm like that.
Yeah. Right. I think the biggest thing that I got out of that process was understanding that it was to liberate myself from the stories and the illusions and the things that were where I was bringing it into my present every single day. That was the process. That's what I really wanted from it. Ultimately, because that was the thing that helped me to move forward and separate myself from being the past and allowing myself to really be who I was in the present.
Well, leading on from that, then my third point is put yourself in the other person's shoes. Although there's a caveat with this.
Yes. I thought there might be.
But I think there are certain circumstances where this terrain needs to be trodden carefully.
Absolutely.
But, like, for example, I was angry at my dad for a number of years because of how he was and the relationship that we had. And I blamed him for a lot of stuff. But over time, what I started to do is to think about, well, why was he like that? Like, how did that make sense for him? And, like, trying to understand how things looked like for him. And kind of the message I learned growing up was, I'm not good enough. And, I'm somehow unworthy or less than. And therefore my coping mechanisms for that were to try hard and try and get validation and try and get love and affection through doing stuff and being praised and all of that. Now, the story I had was I blamed my dad for that. Did my dad's behavior play into that model of the world that I had and the way I learned to see the world? Possibly. But blaming him for that wasn't going to help me change it. Yeah. And what started to help me with that, rather than having that focus and that anger directed at him, was to start to look at, well, how did that make sense for him? And what I realized over time was, well, actually, he was coming from a place of, he wanted everything to be perfect. And he wanted everything to be perfect, I think, because he was worried about fucking everything up. He was worried about ruining everything or everything being ruined. I think he had a real problem with disappointment and all that sort of stuff. And so his way of dealing with that was to be a perfectionist. It came out with his family, because it would be even to the point we used to joke about, even when I was younger, it'd be like, we'd be eating our dinner and he'd be like watching us like a hawk, and he'd be like, eat some peas. No, don't cut your meat like that. Like, look, put your plate close to you. No, don't eat the mash before you've eaten the peas. And it'd be like, I can't do any of this right. But again, that's what made sense to him because of what was going on for him. That wasn't him trying to be an arsehole.
Yeah.
And when I was able to understand that and bring some compassion to it just opened up more possibility for me.
Absolutely. And it's funny because as you were saying that, I was thinking, I got to a certain point in my own process and healing and everything where until I was able to do that, I wasn't going to move any further forward, because it's like showing acceptance and love and all this kind of thing. But it's like, if I can't angle it that way, then I'm not really understanding. If I did what made sense to me, then it makes sense that my parents were doing what made sense to them at that time. And understanding that really helped me. understand, because I think for some time, actually when I was a kid, I think I really sat with the whole thing of, you're doing this on purpose, like, do you hate me, is this because of me, and all this kind of stuff, because that's the only way I could make sense of it then. But I held on to that, so I needed to be able to see it, and I needed to be able to shine that light on them and kind of go, okay, I want to understand, I want to see how this made sense to you, because it had an impact on my parenting. It was just like, it's not just a thing that happens. And yeah, for me, it helped to be able to see that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, because I do think that going back to the blame game thing, I think we can get stuck in that sense of, well, it's either your fault or my fault. And I don't know, more and more when I work with people, and even reflecting on my own experience, the reason it's like that, I think, is because there is still part of me inside that kind of thinks it's my fault. But if I can try and convince myself it's your fault, or there's something like that, but I just find I find it's a lose-lose scenario, because I'm not really angry at the person. I'm kind of angry at that version of them I have in my head. It's like every time I think of them, I get angry, and I might be able to avoid that person, but then when I still think of them, or someone reminds me of them, or then I get angry again, or I get upset or whatever, which is not really about them. That's about me.
Right. Yeah, I used to do that all the time, and it was an active thing. Joe, it'd be like, oh no, that person reminds me of them. No, they can't go there. Can't be their friend. I don't want to talk to them.
Well, this is why, for me, like, all forgiveness is self-forgiveness, and
absolutely.
And I never got that before, because it felt like, to accept, to forgive or whatever is like, what's the word? It's like to let someone off the hook. And I don't think it's the same thing at all. I mean, I choose now not to have a relationship with my dad, because he's a difficult person to get on with. But that doesn't mean that I'm still harbour all this anger and upset and hurt, like, very far from it.
Yeah. And I think that's the beautiful thing, going through a process and really exploring it, because I feel like people get to a space, and I know I got to spaces where it wasn't a decision based in hatred or fear or anger, kind of going, I don't want to ever talk to you again. They're more decisions of, actually, I'm loving myself and I can set loving boundaries, and this is my choice. This isn't because of what you did. This is what I need, and this is where I'm at. And for me, they're two very different places to come from.
Yeah.
Okay. So my third point is find the love first.
Tell me more.
So what I'm learning more and more and more through my own process and working with clients on this sort of stuff all of the time is, for me, my process was quite, like, it started with me being on my degree, my therapy degree. So that wasn't necessarily the space where I was rooted in liking myself or loving myself. None of that. It was having to process while learning. But what I've realized is, as I've taken the journey of loving myself and reconnecting to myself, that's kind of where I needed to be. That was the container I needed before I really looked at the work that I needed to do, the healing, the process that I needed to go through. Because in effect, I was the one that was abandoning myself. I was the one that was rejecting myself. And I wasn't allowing myself to go through the process. And what I realized was I was effectively treating myself like my parents did. In that process. And with a lot of my clients as well, the first bit that needs to happen is the being in that space of love and understanding and compassion with themselves. It is doing that thing that's different. All right. So for me, for example, it was building a relationship that was different to the relationship that I had in childhood with my parents. Because when I treated myself like they were treating me, I wasn't being kind to myself in that processing or healing space. I was doing exactly what they did, which was like, hurry up. Why is this taking so long? Why is it so difficult? Why is it so messy? So I was doing exactly the same thing. And so it wasn't healing, and it wasn't a nice process. It felt horrible. So for me, it's about embedding myself in that different space first and showing myself that something that's different because from that space, the whole experiencing of the past was different for me.
Yeah.
So for me, I really believe that the first bit is really to be in that space of understanding and self-compassion and self-love, because the process is painful, the healing process. The process takes time. The process takes patience. And if you're not in that space with yourself, it's really easy to abandon yourself and reject yourself and end up in a even more painful space.
Yeah, and it's interesting you talking about that, about, you know, what I heard in that was like, learn to be different with yourself.
Yeah.
And for me, that's almost an argument for like not diving into the past with a bunch of whys and going digging.
Yeah.
Because doing that, I might get, you know, I might get a nice story or an understanding of why, but it's not necessarily going to teach me something new. And I had similar in that I didn't really take good care of myself, but I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a self-compassionate relationship with myself was, like treating myself as I would a friend, like that.
Yeah.
Didn't even occur to me. And any diving into the past to understand whys or whatever never taught me that.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, to come to my fourth point.
Let's go.
No, it's not let's go. But good guess.
Oh, well, next time.
My fourth point is talk it through.
Yes.
But again, this comes with a caveat that like talk it through if it's necessary. Like, again, I used to do a lot of regression work, so I would go digging, and for me that's not necessarily helpful. But for somebody, for example, who's got a difficult relationship with their parents or a difficult relationship with a sibling, if there is a lot of history there and they've got a lot of story, a lot of past around it, then that might need talking about. Or you know, if there's been something more serious like abuse of some kind, then that needs talking through, I think, because there's often underneath there'll be a lot of fear or shame or guilt or something that doesn't necessarily just disappear on its own. But again, a further caveat with that is, for me, it's about finding someone to talk it through with who you trust. Yeah. And maybe even someone who's trained, because, you know, we've all spoken to that person that's like, oh, don't worry about it, you're fine.
Yeah, it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you know, they might show or sympathy, or I don't know, whatever the response is that it either might not be helpful or it might not help us move things. Because for me, there needs that connection, that trust, and that understanding, that being seen. But then also, ultimately, I think what we're looking for is a shift in perspective. We're looking to see something new, to move out of that space of stuckness. Yeah. And especially if there's been something difficult that's happened to us, I think that's where there needs TLC and pacing. Because, you know, you don't want, if you've got something, if someone did some really fucking horrible shit to you, you don't want someone going, so if you just put yourself in their shoes, what do you think they were thinking?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Completely. And that is why even doing this episode is just like such a carefully considered thing. Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely agree with that. And it was point number 15. Connect. At least it wasn't like point 472 or something.
You never disappoint, Ms. Dave.
I know. Okay. So my fourth point, patient you must be, as Yoda would say. Patient you must be.
Interested in more, I am.
Okay, we're not doing this whole point like that. So fuck it, I'm leaving it there. Okay. Yeah, this is not one of those scenarios where it's like, I'm going to sit there this afternoon and I'm just going to rip the plaster off and unearth my past, and then it's all going to go away and it's all going to disappear and it's all going to be fucking amazing. This is a process. It takes commitment. It takes, for me, really a space, a holding space for that process, for being able to look at it all. For me, the process was around healing. It was a grieving. It was a loss of my childhood and my innocence, because that's what it essentially was. And I was the person that needed to acknowledge it, nobody else but me. And that's what made the difference. But I had to allow it and give it the space and not just wish it away. Because it was in the wishing it away that I was just replicating what had already happened. And that was the thing that was painful. It was the wishing it away and not being able to acknowledge it or sit with it or shine the light on it. It was the me seeing it as something that was disgusting or that I shouldn't be feeling, shouldn't be thinking about. And there was a level of guilt as well when I first started the journey around, you know, I'm thinking about my parents like that. I'm thinking about other people like that. Oh, God, you're a terrible person for doing all of that. So it's like, don't hurry it. Really give yourself the time and know that it is. For me, I kind of accept it as a process for life, because there's always spaces where it will just show up. And that's okay. It's not something I'm going to get over. It's something I engage with as part of my process in life and my journey in life. And yeah, it's really not about, for me, it ended up not about being not about the story, but rather my internalization and the projection that it became into every area of my life. And that's taken a long time to work on. And I'm just present to it. It's not something I want to package away. It's not something I want to get rid of, because it's a big part of who I am. So really take the time with that process. Be patient with yourself. Be patient with the process and allow the healing. It's not a linear thing. It happens as it needs to. So give it the permission. Give yourself the permission.
It kind of leads on nicely to my fifth point, which is change the script. Do something different. For me, it's about seeing that yeah, you can change things. Kind of back to what I was saying earlier about I might have learned to be a certain way. That doesn't mean that I'm stuck that way. It doesn't mean that just because these things happened that that it's set in stone. I do believe a lot of these, I do believe a lot of what we experience is a learning process, and therefore it can be we can either learn something different, or maybe sometimes those learning processes get stuck.
Yeah.
Like something I was thinking about before this episode was, you know, what if my dad had been one of those really encouraging dads, and where he was all around and had, you know, the American movie kind of relationship. Would my life have been different? Well, absolutely, of course it would. Would my childhood have been nicer? Possibly, yeah. But would I be the person I am now? Would I do the work I do now? Would I have some of the understandings I do about now? Like, would I have the compassion that I have now? I don't think I probably would have done. Like, knowing what I'm like, I'd probably be like, those fucking people should just buck their ideas up.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm so fucking glad I'm not like that, basically.
Me too.
But yeah, change the script. It's like something that came to me about where I really saw this was, you know, I was terrified of confrontation. I was terrified of confrontation. And I remember specifically once I was doing some training. I was staying at like some pub hotel in Dartford or something. And there was this woman outside where my kind of room was. There was like a shared bathroom just outside it. And there was this woman there, and she was really loud with her kids, and she was sort of talking with her kids. And she was just really loud, really loud. And I'm there and I'm getting really frustrated, and I'm there but I'm feeling like I can't say anything. but then I'm getting wound up because I want it to stop, but I'm feeling like I can't do anything. And there's this real tension. And it just got to this point, as I'm sitting with it, and then something just came out of me and I just went, shut up. And this is through the door. But what was really interesting, as soon as I said it, this wave of terror came over me, and I almost saw as like a hallucination my dad come at me.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, and I felt the fear drain, it felt like something draining out of me, but I'm sure some of it was adrenaline. And what was really interesting though was that then the woman hushed her voice.
Yeah.
And she didn't come bursting through the door. She didn't come and have a go at me. She just quietened down. And I was there and I was like, fuck.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. And I can't fully explain what I saw in that moment, but it was something along the lines of, okay, possibly that stuff was based on some old shit about being terrified of my dad, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But in that moment, I got to change that script. I got to do something different. I got to see that actually I am capable of doing something and there being a different outcome than I expected. Was it the best thing to tell some random to shut up rather than go out and have a polite conversation? Probably not. But none of that seemed possible to me. All that seemed available to me up until that point was just staying quiet and being angry at it.
Yeah.
And actually there was a whole there is more possibilities available to me, but I didn't see it until that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
love that.
Change the script.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. Point number 5, go to the spaces that scare you. So I feel like that leads on quite nicely from yours.
It does. Tell me more.
Well, for me, it's quite similar actually to what you were speaking to, right? It's those places that I told myself I can't, like I'm too frightened, I'm not courageous enough. And then over time kind of realizing that courage isn't really the absence of fear. Courage is having the fear and stepping into it anyway and making the choice to do that and to do something different. And I think I used to have a lot of stories about those spaces. I can't do this because I can't go and do that because, and those were the things that kept me in my stories. And a lot of them were formulated from my stories of the past, things that had been put on me or I'd been told, things like, well, you're always going to be a failure. So that was quite neatly kind of, I could use that quite easily to go, well, I can't go and do that because I'm going to fail and because I'm a failure. So then it was like having to have the courage to be able to step into that and visit those spaces that really, really frightened me, speaking my truth or sharing with somebody how I really, really feel or what's going on for me. But one of the bigger ones was saying no to people about stuff, which I really used to struggle with. I used to have such a big story about the horrific thing that might happen if I said no to somebody for something that they wanted me to do. And the only way that I found of proving that that wasn't the case was to step into it and do it. And know, like you, that the worst case scenario wasn't going to happen, right? And now I kind of try and step into those spaces and go, what's the best case scenario here? What's the best thing that could happen, right? I'm going to learn something. Even if it goes wrong, I'm going to learn something. But when exploring my past, it was the spaces that I didn't want to go to that held the most learning for me, that really catapulted my process and really changed things for me. They are the spaces that held the most magic in the end and really allowed me to step into my power.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah,
and for me that starts with questioning that the story I've got is true and absolute. It's like I was talking about earlier. We were talking about the protective nature of the story. It's like it protects me from this stuff, but then it can also trap me. And for me, the first step is actually having that kind of doubt in it, what I like to call positive doubt. It's like, what if I'm not right? Like when that happened to me at the hotel room, that didn't really feel like a conscious choice in that moment. But the learning I got from being in that position was, oh, maybe this stuff can be fucked with then.
Exactly. It was like not so long ago, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, where I had like a mini coaching session with a wonderful Jamie Spot. And at the start of that space, I was very much in the space of going, I can't drive. I can't get in a car and I cannot drive. I cannot do this. I just can't. And I think it was about 15 minutes of story time. But I had to step into the fear. And I'm putting it out there that I got into the car after that and I fucking drove.
Wow,
it just dissolved. It took 15 minutes. And I think that is why it's so important to step into those spaces that scare you. Because for me, that is always where the magic is. Where the discomfort is where you get the most like learning from.
That's where you go.
Yeah, and that's the only way you can learn what you're truly capable of.
So, closing thoughts on how to get over your childhood.
Okay. So what I wanted to say was one of my favorite things, which is if you live with one foot in the past and one foot in the future, you are pissing on your present. And you deserve so much more than that. Like, you are not the past. You are not the childhood. You are not the issues, the trauma, the experiences that you've had. You are this amazing being of love and light. Honor yourself. Honor where you are at now. And think about the extraordinary life you can create in the now and in the future, rather than staying stuck in the spaces that are not serving you, and move forward with love.
I love that. So mine's short and sweet. Your past may have helped shape you, but it doesn't have to define you. You can change the script to create something new.
Love it.
27 episodes.
Whoop, whoop.
Done and dusted.
Yay. You've been listening to the Notcast podcast, Life, Love, Misery and Deep Shit, with your TheraCoach hosts,
Amy Dave.
and David Bird.
Amy is a transformative spiritual and self-love coach and therapist who takes people on a powerful journey towards self-love and personal transformation. She empowers her clients to discover the truth of who they really are, their true purpose, and the truest expression of themselves, whilst enabling them to navigate life and its challenges with ease, grace, and above all, love. Create relationships that rock their world and let go of the toxic shit that holds them back. You can connect with Amy on her Facebook at facebook.com/amy.dave11. That's AMI.DAVE.11.
David is a transformative coach and hypnotherapist who guides his clients on a journey of self-exploration and transformation to smash the shit out of their mental stumbling blocks and send their emotional baggage packing, helping them to get back in the driver's seat, create a more powerful, loving connection to life, and unleash onto the world their bright, shining light of authentic give-a-fuckness. You can connect with David at his website, dbch.co.uk. That's dbch.co.uk.
The Notcast.